So now we're going to talk about future. Chris mentioned reimagining the future. There's a lot of discussion now about what will the future look like, especially now we're at this pivotal moment for business and for entrepreneurs. So there's so much thinking going on about creating and building your business in this future. But what might be the guiding lights for the years to come? What's it going to look like? And now we're delighted to be joined by somebody who, from a company who are living up to their name, true to their name, innovative, future thinking, a key consultative tech advisor, a developer for startups, who's going to help us look into that future by what they're doing and their thinking as well in the future. That company is Rocketmakers, and I'm really excited to be able to speak to Richard Godfrey today. Richard, hello, are you there?
Fantastic, yeah, thanks, Cameron. I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Hello, Richard, very nice to see you. We'll start off with your presentation and then come to questions. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed. So yeah, thank you, and hello everybody. So hi, I'm Richard Godfrey. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Rocketmakers. And when Greg was telling me the early days about EntreConf, he said, "I'd like you to do a session," and I'm thinking it's called "What If?" You know, a bit of future gazing, because I know you like to do that kind of stuff. Well, I do. So I said yes, and then last week I actually had to start thinking about this. So when I thought about it, what if it's just really hard on its own, isn't it? It's essentially it's a blank sheet of paper, and when you're asked to start imagining something, anything, you just can't. So as an engineer, I thought I'd go a little bit meta on this, and I thought, well, what if I write a list of the what if questions that we're actively working on right now at Rocketmakers? So the list on the right there just goes through some of the projects that are active today, and you know, there's some really cool stuff that's happening in there that is going to change the world in one way or another, and that's really what entrepreneurship is all about. So before I dive in, I should give you a little bit of context of Rocketmakers. So we're a software design development company, come accelerator, come startup investor thing. We love working with anyone essentially who wants to innovate. So that ranges from helping sort of smart individual entrepreneurs with their first sort of small steps, all through to building some of the UK's most impactful scale-up and corporate systems. And one of the big differences, I think, about us is that we kind of like to have this kind of win or lose with our customers approach. So it's often investing sweat equity in their business. And for me, that just makes the relationships awesome. It keeps us working in the same direction all the time. So, I should have mentioned our Queen's Award that we're incredibly proud of as well for innovation. That was all about some work around sort of sports innovation, which I'll come on to in a little bit. So that's a little bit about us. Oh, well, yes, and we do have a few rockets lying around. You would, wouldn't you, with our name? So we have a nice rocket in the office. But the good news is you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work here. So on to Greg's what if question. And as entrepreneurs, usually when you think about what if, you're thinking about what could be possible. It's all about imagination, creativity, dreams. What if you had unlimited resources? What could you do? But the thing with what if, in my mind, is that it all depends on your outlook and your circumstances. You know, for some it is about the dreams, innovation, creativity, expansiveness, but for others it's all about, nightmares, worries, anxiety, risks. If you think about, what if we don't close that round by Thursday? What if we can't pay salaries this month? What if we tell somebody our idea and they steal it? There's a lot of glass half empty kind of approaches that can come in with what if as a question. So as entrepreneurs, I think we need to leverage both perspectives. What are the strengths and opportunities that we get? But what are the weaknesses and threats that we need to manage? And certainly as a business, we've just been going through just that process ourselves in our kind of annual planning process, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, but also how we can use those, our strengths to combat those weaknesses and the opportunities that are there. And I think that glass half full, glass empty view is also kind of interesting from the perspective of investment into businesses. And as you saw earlier, we've kind of helped raise a lot of investment into a lot of the startups that we work with, and that's great. But entrepreneurs are always coming from the glass half full what if end. It's what if we can get 1% of the market share? What if our viral coefficient is 1.5? It's all about that sort of positive approach of presentation of capability. But if you think about it, on the other side, the investors are often kneeling to deal with that glass half empty thing. It's that, what if they can't execute and we need to replace the founder? It's what if I can't get them to, what if I can get them to de-risk it a bit? Investment is all about de-risking. So if I can get somebody to de-risk it just that little bit more before I have to commit, then that's a potential. So again, as entrepreneurs, we have to kind of sell the positive what ifs and manage the negative what ifs all at the same time. And that's really easy, right? Not at all. So, okay, I know we've talked about future gazing, and that needed to come onto this part of it. And I like the cool stuff tech too. So let's get going on that. So there are so many technologies and new things happening that are making new things possible. So just to I picked a few here that are typically talked about. And what about the blockchain? So with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Polkadot, and others, they're all enabling things like smart contracts, decentralized finance transactions. So the big sort of what if question there is, what if we had a public ledger that allowed everyone to see your transactions? What would you do with that? Then there's things like AI and machine learning. So enabling sort of specific categorization and then predictions based on large training and data sets and various algorithms that create things like predictive recommendations, like you see with Amazon suggesting that you might something else, or even self-driving cars. So what if you could predict the future based on the past? What would you do? Then we've got things like VR, AR, MR, XR, with them all combined. Now this is enabling us to annotate the real world or take us to non-existent worlds to experience things that we may never get to do in real life. So what if you could travel anywhere in seconds without ever leaving your sofa? What would you do? And then you've got things like underlying technologies, things that you just don't see, but things like 5G or maybe even 6G now people are talking about. It's enabling faster mobile speeds than many fixed line connections that you can have. What if you had speeds that are 100 times 4G? What would you do with that stuff? And then in the bottom right corner there, we've got the Internet of Things, the IoT. So enabling almost every device to be connected to the internet and then communicating with other devices in a smart home, office, or other environment. What if your washing machine was connected to the internet? What does that enable? So what would you do with that capability? So I think the thing that's important about this kind of set of technologies and many others that are sort of sitting around this is fundamentally they're just enablers, right? They're technology that makes some things possible that weren't before. So now, what if you combine those technologies together to create some things that really haven't been done before, that sort of true innovation? And I think that blending of a bunch of these new technologies is where a real interest lies for me. In fact, we've just been doing, sometimes we do some of that internally, sometimes we do it with customers. And over the last 2 years, we've been working on our own Innovate UK funded project called Beam. So we're combining AR and VR experiences with real-time analytics and starting to get some AI in there to provide a way to dynamically beam 3D objects into immersive experiences. So it might be a game, it might be an event like the one that we're at today, but in 3D environments. And then to analyze that sort of user behavior that's going on in real time around those objects, and then to change the experience later on. So when you walk into a shoe shop in a new 3D retail experience, perhaps the shoes that you're looking at most are the ones that you then see later in your experience as you start to move towards a checkout of thing. And this is a lot of the thinking that we've been doing around combining, AR, VR, AI into these things. Check out beam3d.co. There's a little video on there just to start to get a little feel of that, if that interests you. So, I knew it'd happen. I'm kind of getting carried away with the what if possibilities and the technology enablers, just like Greg thought I would. So back to reality for a second. We need to start with why. Now, Simon Sinek suggests that your entrepreneur journey needs to start with a why rather than what if, and I think I agree. It's without a purpose, it's just an idea, and of course, all ideas are free and in abundance, aren't they? So. And I also like what good old Buzz Aldrin has to say about needing a plan to go alongside that passion and purpose. After all, he's a proper rocket man, so he should know, shouldn't he? I suppose. So our approach, and I thought I'd share our kind of why and plan. So is that we're focused mostly, less on revenue and offices or staff numbers, as Greg was talking about earlier, mostly on positive impact that we have on the world through our work. And our plan is not more on sort of the right-hand side. It's to do what we're good at. And that means three things for me. It means innovation, the what-if thinking that's around. It means quality, the design and development and things of bringing things together. And then number three, positive impact, which is finding that win-win relationship and working on something that, fundamentally is worth more than money. So on the innovation side, taking that first, Greg and I are old enough to remember the ancient spot the ball competition. So where you had to guess where the ball's going to be. And looking to where technology's enablers are taking us is a really solid approach. Skate to where the puck is going is what people say, yeah. But of course, you have to remember that everyone and their dog is heading to where we're told the puck is going to be, to hybrid working, to well-being, to distributed finance, to AI, to AR, VR. So I guess, what do you know that they don't? If that's the opportunity, why will you be successful where they won't? Or maybe you take the opposite approach. Maybe you should go out on your own and hope that puck will find you. Sometimes it's about taking a punt and making your own luck and hoping something happens. So I've put together a few examples of where some of our customers have estimated where the puck's going, and I think they're doing it pretty well. So one is an example of seeing where the technology sort of innovation ball was going. And it's something we did with Team Bath Racing. So we asked the team at Bath Uni, who design and build, and then they race their own Formula student car from nothing. They just get given an engine and they have to build the rest. What their biggest issues in design and manufacturing were. And they told us their problems were around carbon fiber layout. So specifically having to fix distinct shapes of carbon fiber in the right direction on the car shell over a really stressful 48-hour period. So we thought, well, what if overlaying real-time CAD images of the next piece of carbon fiber in the right direction via Microsoft HoloLens goggles could help? They liked the concept, so we started to build it for them. And this photo in the slide there is the first test. We showed just how valuable the technology was in starting to deliver on that sort of promise. Then another spot the pool innovation example was really looking at gathering sports injury data. So back in 2008, I think it was, we started prototyping a new medical record system for the most elite athletes in the UK. The English Institute of Sport had identified that illness and injury were the biggest risk of us not achieving our potential medal tally at Rio in 2016. So the what if was, could we increase the quality of data and then gather enough of that data to help predict and even stop illness or injury? And then what if we could bring athletes back faster into their training schedules using that data? So we built the system with Team GB, went on to get second place at the Olympics. No coincidence, of course, it was all to do with the system that stopped the injuries and stuff. We're working now, and next stop Tokyo for us with that one. And then from the technology side, there's also innovative business model side. So, Pure Planet were founders which had a really interesting history in the telco world, and they're skating to where the puck's going story is all about a revolutionary business model. Their thinking was to radically change the incumbent models with 100% renewable energy at lower cost than dirty energy. So all by delivering great service via an app-only model and an enthusiastic and committed community. So we were sold from day one, and we continue to work with those teams to add renewables into the whole UK economy. So I kind of use those hopefully as a bit of an illustration about loving the problem. And I think, it's when you love the problem, it gives you the freedom to get feedback and then change and pivot the solution. It helps you understand who has the problem, what their pain points are, so you can start to build something that is most likely going to be successful. I've got an extreme example of this. This is one of the startups that we worked with is Immortal. It's a 10-year-old yet to launch startup, which kind of doesn't make sense, does it? But, the founder loves the problem so much that together we've built a better solution 4 times, despite Microsoft looking to buy it some years ago. So I think that's a great example of truly, deeply loving the problem. So the second and third parts I'll just touch on, but essentially, if the first part is innovation, the second part is about quality for us, and it's about design. Design's always the cheapest time to make mistakes. It's before any line of code is ever written and stuff. So it just makes sense to double down on that UX design prototyping piece, doesn't it? And at Rocketmakers, we talk a lot about rather not starting the journey without knowing that we've actually going to create something that is likely to be successful at the end of it, with real data to prove that. And after all, if we're putting our own blood, sweat, and tears into it alongside the entrepreneurs, we want to know that that's going to be the case. And then it's caring about how you build it. So, what if you had most of the building blocks needed for a project ready to go right at the start? So that's a question that we've been asking ourselves, and we've tried to answer by building our own tools and technologies that can really accelerate projects. So tools like Orbit. So Orbit provides core back-end services like notifications and file uploads, authentication, auditing, all the things that typical apps just need to have. We've invested in building those things to try and accelerate projects. And then there's Armstrong, which is a UI component library that speeds up the delivery of front end of apps as well. But the most important thing there is it's about building upon a strong foundation of things that have been tried and tested, and then trying to add that innovation and that entrepreneurs are looking for on top of that kind of platform of things. So the third part and the last part really is about to do things with a positive impact. And I hate to break it to you, but apparently most startups fail. And personally, I don't like the word fail. As me, it's about the learning that comes from it. But I suppose let's not beat around the bush, as we're all friends here now. If you're going to fully commit to something and it may well fail, then why wouldn't your what if be something really, truly meaningful? And if, like many, you never get to that end goal of exiting for, and the term sheets that we just heard about, please, please, please make sure that you've enjoyed the journey along the way. For Rocketmakers, over 90% of our work is about positive impact projects, and that's because we need to make a difference and we need to enjoy the journey that we're on to. So to wrap it up, what if is the wrong question to start with? Find the why, and then use those technology enablers wherever you can to get that edge and find where the potential is. Love a real problem, test that problem and then be prepared to change that solution over and over and over and again to get it right. Make something amazing and enjoy the views along the way. So that's me. Now it's time for me to kind of give you Greg's blank sheet of paper back. That what if, what if you could change the world tomorrow? What would you do? I welcome and would love to see some of those answers. Thank you.
Richard, that was really fascinating and mind-blowing, actually. There's so much to learn and so much to know about. And what you're saying, this navigating your way through this future with all of these things, and as you say, spotting the puck or the ball in that, and the way the future is going. What I was interested about is we've got some questions coming, and if it's okay with you, we'd like to ask you some questions from the floor and from ourselves. But what I'm specifically interested in is navigating sort of how far can you look into the future? So some of the things you talk about in the next 2 years, 4 years. Well, how far do you actually look and say, well, actually, or do you put a cut-off point and say, let's be honest about it, everything's going to change after 5 years?
Well, I think that's a great question, and things are changing, faster and faster than ever. I've got the grey hairs now, and it's harder for me to adapt to just the speed of change that's going on in all the frameworks and things that people are using to build software these days. I guess I had the pleasure of before starting Rocketmakers up, working at Microsoft, and Bill Gates had a really interesting perspective on this, so I'll probably refer to him rather than me there. But he had this view, and it came across: the people overestimate what can be done in 3 years, and they underestimate what can be done in 10 years. And I think we've seen that. If you look at, if you think back 10 years ago, and just the revolution that's happened with, these sorts of devices, and Facebook, and massive social change that perhaps people hadn't seen at that time. And then people have kind of overstated some of the things that they thought would be, AR and VR is a great example where people have always thought it's going to have that kind of real impact change in 2 to 3 years time, and it's we've been doing it for 20, maybe 30 years now, that people have been thinking that's going to happen, and it gradually is. And I think timing is a really important part of the whole area around entrepreneurs. In fact, there's some really interesting research from Idea Labs which said that timing was the most important thing. Actually, team was number 2. The idea, the concept and stuff was really number 3 in that. So I guess from the thinking about what if and the idea and stuff, that is unless you've got the right team to build it, as Chris was saying at the start of the day, and also if you haven't got that, if you're just not there at the right time for all those things to come together, then that's a challenge. So I think it's to think in that 10-year and 3-year horizon, and that's one thing that we've done in the business. Really started over about a year ago, where we've started to put a 10-year plan in, a 3-year plan in, a 1-year plan in, and then every 90 days we have that kind of quarterly approach to it all, and so that we've got all those different perspectives at the same time.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Richard. And all the time, 3 years, 1 month, 10 years, loving the problem, and which I think is a really good thing. I'm definitely taking that one away, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, talking about that, as an entrepreneur, you are always, aren't you, grappling with the problem? Because the problem could be something technical, but it could be just something that, how do I make this successful? Where does it fit? What's it going to look like? So would you say those are the things that some people, when you're talking to startups, those are the things also that they're asking you about?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Anybody that has that passion to be an entrepreneur, and who has that idea of something that is there, it sort of becomes their baby, doesn't it? And we see that an awful lot. And I think that the danger with that is often if the baby is a fixed idea of what it is, and it then becomes really difficult to get the change. And one thing that we've seen over the last decade of working with hundreds of startups now is that the world's just constantly changing around it. So even the ideas that you might have had of where something is, so you might have some preconceptions, but then when you actually go in through the design process, and if you spend that time doing that user research and really understanding the user journeys and testing those things, quite often, and I would say probably in the majority of cases, the feedback is quite different from what the founder's vision and the original idea is. But you have to then be able to say, there's data to support this. And one of the things that I love suggesting that people do is to kind of have some hypothesis. So, choose the 3 things that you want to test at any point in time, and just go out and test them as fast and as cheaply as you possibly can. And usually that doesn't involve making any technology at all. So usually you can do things with spreadsheets, or even just get out and on the street and talk to somebody and mock things up as conceptual ideas and get feedback. Because I think one of the things that people are always scared about, and I mentioned it in the presentation, this idea of what if I share my idea and somebody steals it? Well, the idea is not the thing. It's the again, Chris said it at the start there. It's about determination, and some people are just going to go through and have the persistence and determination to be successful and make this happen. Other people just won't. And I think if you're one of those people with that determination, share the idea, get the feedback, get what is going to be successful or likely to be successful, and then double down on delivering that. And I think that's the best route to finding an exit from the business here.
That's really useful. Yes, you wouldn't think that, I've got to tell people, partly because people are nervous about, is it going to make sense to others, but actually sharing is a really important way of finding out, well, does this land? Does it make sense to people? Is it something that, people will want? And, I think that's a really good point, Richard. We do have a question from the floor from Rick Gordon-Brown, who talks a little bit on the subject of technology future gazing. Patent applications are usually published sometime before the associated products are launched, giving insights into what could be coming next. So that ties into our what we've just been talking about. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the whole patents are a really interesting area and stuff, and usually. A lot of the time when people talk about patents, I have a challenge for them, which is can you afford to defend a patent? And when people often try and spend time to get that protection, actually you have to think sort of beyond that sort of first phase of it. But patents are important. With the Beam, the VR AR product that I mentioned, we've applied for a patent on that because we feel like there's some really interesting process and change to do around that. So I think it's an interesting guide to that, but there's also a lot of other stuff, isn't there, that's around. I mean, I saw last week that I think it was Facebook. It was certainly one of the big companies was looking at a integrated AR goggles in a hat and stuff. So there's an awful lot of things which are, maybe there's things which might be taking you down the wrong path. Some of our work with the sports. I remember going to British Cycling once, and we were looking at some of the bikes there. And one of the challenges they have is they have to show all of their innovation on bikes in world championships, etc., before the Olympics. So it becomes a little bit of an arms race around, perhaps showing, the real technologies, but also maybe some decoy technologies and things that will distract people around it. So I think it's a useful identification of direction, but I wouldn't put a lot of effort into that.
Thank you. Well, we are out of time, but I am going to ask Greg. I want to ask one more question, Richard. Oh, has he gone?
Let's send him back.
Is he there? Is Richard there?
What if Richard could return?
Yes.
Let's have a look.
Can we magic Richard back?
We can hear you.
I think it's a really important question, Richard, because this is a theme that's running through today. And it started off with Chris Anderson talking about giving back and about, and so I want to ask you, you talked a lot about positive impact. Tell me, is a sense of purpose increasing for entrepreneurs? Is it compatible for entrepreneurs, or is it incompatible with an entrepreneur's view, which may be just about profit making? If you can do that quickly, Greg won't tell me off.
as if. What if?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I think it definitely is. I think it's really fundamentally changing, and I think we're definitely seeing more and more people trying to get that right balance between, creating interesting businesses that are actually going to have that positive impact, and and the fact that most of our projects are like that just kind of tells me that this is a direction of travel that I hope is going to continue. And I think it's I think it's just, why wouldn't you do that? As I sort of finish the presentation, it just, it feels like, with the advent of B Corps, I mean, we're on our own journey to B Corp and stuff there. So having that sort of triple bottom line to business, I think, is a really important way of thinking about it. And for our own, our next generations to come, thinking about my kids and that, and having that future, I think is something that, if you can make amazing things, if you can make profitable businesses and you can do incredible good in the process, then why wouldn't you try and do that?
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, Rocket Man from Rocketmakers. Thank you very much.
Very good. And to unite that point, you know, what if this pandemic actually did help reset, help the tectonic plates to shift? The momentum's been moving towards a sense of purpose for a long time. We all want to believe that. Maybe there's a great opportunity now. Richard, that was a superb presentation.